Tim. Welcome to Watch You Want, and thanks for joining us tonight. Well, I'm here with Niko Maldonado. How are you doing, Niko?
I'm great. Glad to be here.
This is a wild card Wednesday that you didn't expect. Mike Michaels has the night off, so we're coming to you with a little bit of a bonus. Federico is talking watches in the live chat box, so engage via chat if you want to talk to Fed as we work through our talking points. We've got a couple of topics tonight that we think you're going to enjoy. We've got a this or that. We have a series of graduation watches because in the United States it is that time of year for high schools and college. And then we have a little bit of a grim ward. Buyer beware at watch auctions this coming spring. So, Niko, let's jump right into it. This or that. Two big, complicated, open movement, high horology pieces from mid-size manufacturers within the same group. We have the Ulysse Nardin Freak Blue Cruiser. White gold, 45 millimeters, 7-day carousel. It's not tourbillon, but it's a carousel, 7-day power reserve. This is a 3 ATM water-resistant watch, the first water-resistant Freak, and it's $95,000. The alternative from sister firm within Kering Group, Girard-Perregaux, we have the 2013 Aguidor winner, basically best picture for watchmaking, the Girard-Perregaux Constant Force in its more wearable 46 millimeter case size, both manual wind, this one 6-day power reserve in titanium, same relatively low water resistance, $87,000. Niko, which one of these do you take?
Wow. I mean, two incredibly engineered watches. To watch the functions on both is really nice. The UN Blue Cruiser is something that I've talked to a few clients about before. For me, this amount of money to invest, you really have to know what you're getting into. I think if I was going to go with one of the two, I would buy the UN. Okay. Frankly, just because of the fact that I've seen both of them in person. I think the UN is a little bit more wearable. Okay, I love the blue. I'm a sucker for blue, as we talked about before. And overall, if both of these are keep pieces, then I won't go into market value, but I really do like the watch for everything it offers.
Okay, I think that's a good choice because ultimately neither one of these watches is discreet. They are both big, boisterous, extrovert watch nerd watches. Like, there are little watch nerd watches like the Jaeger-LeCoultre Jubilee Master Ultra Thin. That was a watch nerd watch that can quite literally fly under the radar and under the cuff. These are both gigantic watch nerd watches, almost like a Tonka truck for your wrist, but more expensive and more fun. Since neither one of them is bashful, we're not going to go into taste, but I think you do have something in the idea that the Freak is the more established. Around since 2001, it is sort of a modern tradition at UN, whereas the Constant Force is kind of new, and I'm not really sure that it's part of, the all-time canon of Girard-Perregaux. It's not the icon that the Freak is. So yeah, there is that whole. I mean, that's something that's important to our viewers. If you were to sell, ultimately the Freak has a bigger market.
Absolutely, yeah. That's pretty much a big driver of my choice.
Okay. Now, Raph does have a great picture of the awesome Constant Force escapement, though. So I guess I'm going to throw in my 2 cents, guys. I toss caution to the wind. Of the two, I can't wear either one, so I may as well own the Constant Force. It entertains me more. But that's that. I'm the irrational one here. I don't work in sales. Okay, so here's the other thing. Tonight on the table, I have a little bit of a rock star. And by a rock star, I mean like The Who, the Rolling Stones, the Beatles in their prime level rock star. Raph, we have my little Patek Philippe 5016R. And I'm sharing this with you guys because if you want to see wrist reviews of watches like this Tourbillon Retrograde Perpetual Calendar Minute Repeater Chronometer, you can see them on my new Watch You Want watch review channel. That's where I'm just doing talking hands videos. I want to give you a case back shot too since I've come this far. But that's where I'm just doing the talking hand style videos that I've done in the past. And I am posting a video of this very watch later today. So if you like to see the best of wrist reviews, including a watch that is the rose gold version of the timepiece that holds the all-time record for most expensive wristwatch ever, you can see it on Watch You Want watch reviews. Okay, Niko, from the absolutely unbelievable and, again, scarcely believable that it's on the table, we go to watches for graduates. This time of year, people are thinking about getting watches for that special person who's graduating high school or college. Why don't you tell us which 2 watches you would pick and why?
Yeah, I mean, basically, when I went through and kind of made this choice, the first thing I thought of was, what is a watch that's going to get somebody into it? What's something that's going to be easy to learn off of, be economical to afford, and, still have a good level of horology to, let them educate themselves and get into the entire thing as a hobby and a passion. So the first one that I chose was the Omega Speedmaster Moonwatch, 42 millimeter. I am a fan of the Speedy Reduced, but I went with the 42 just as far as what's more popular in the base. This is a watch that's got great wearability, great crossover aspects to it. Bracelet's really nice. You can get this watch, I think retail starts at like right around 5,000.
Yeah, for the bracelet.
Right, for the bracelet edition. So that's a great watch to start off with. What are your thoughts on that one?
Well, I mean, you can't go wrong. Now, we're going to say these are watches you're not going to sell. This is an important occasion in a person's life. You graduate high school or college hopefully once, and that's a moment that's marked in your life by a great watch. So we're not going to talk about resale, but let's talk about which watch carries more inherent meaning. The Moonwatch definitely is that hook that could both give someone a sense of real reward because Omega is a prestigious brand that's commonly known, and the Moonwatch is its iconic model. So if you're going to own just one, own that one.
Yeah, absolutely.
And at the same time, it's got a cool story such that I think even if you weren't a watch guy and you received this watch, you would have enough curiosity about why it's called the Moonwatch and how it's involved in space exploration that you would at least do a Google search. And from there, hopefully, we have the roots of a new watch enthusiast.
Yeah, exactly, and that's the entire drive behind that choice.
So also a great watch because it's fairly tough. I mean, let's face it, NASA picked it because it's hard to break. Always helps when someone's getting their first high-end watch. But sort of at the other end of the spectrum, from toughness to delicacy and refinement, what's your other choice?
Yeah, the Zenith Elite Ultra Thin. And you guys have heard me talk about this watch a lot. This is one that I personally have enjoyed. It's something that I think that when you're graduating from college, maybe you're going into the corporate world, it's something that's going to have a very classic feel to it, very under the cuff.
Yeah.
Something that can be worn to an office every day, be economical enough to be a desk diver, but be something that's understated enough to not draw too much attention and at least have you enter into the world of horology on a good note. So that's why I really like this choice.
Yeah, and I think that's a great choice for 2 reasons. First, it's unimpeachable. As a Zenith with a caliber 681 Elite, you're getting a great movement, you're getting a display case back, so it's got even a little bit of a bigger hook to get the person who receives it interested in watches. But because it doesn't look ostentatious, it doesn't have the size and the height and the technical dial of the Omega, nor does it have the boutique. I mean, to the mainstream public, Omega is a boutique watch name. We think of it as kind of mass production, middle of the market, but to the mainstream public, Omega is up there with Rolex. And therefore, the Elite, as a brand and a model that both fly under the radar, it's not going to call out excess arrogance or wealth or lack of any pressing need for a job when you're moving into the interview environment and you're starting to talk to prospective employers for your first job out of college. I'm not sure you want to show up with something that to the general public is the equivalent of a Rolex, and to a lot of folks that's what an Omega is. So maybe there's something to be said for discretion with the Zenith.
Yeah, absolutely, and that's what I've always enjoyed about it. I've kind of stated a lot of times that having a brand that isn't mainstream, quote-unquote mainstream, and having somebody come up to you about it is one of the most rewarding things about being a watch collector.
Yeah, so I think those are 2 great choices. You can't go wrong with either one. Neither one of them is going to be a jump in the surf and swim watch, although on a bracelet, the Moonwatch could just about pull it off with 5 ATM. So if you do give one of these watches as a gift, remember to tell the recipient this watch has to be taken care of in a way that a conventional Quartz, Seiko, or G-Shock, or Timex Ironman would not be. That's the other part of the puzzle. Now, I want to give a quick shout out to our live audience joining us from around the world. I see our friends Federico and Josh Thanos are actually talking watches in the chat box. Welcome Emil, welcome Mike, welcome Nicholas Anderson. A question from Olivier Aubin, who's asking, what's the difference between a Seiko Kinetic and a spring drive? I'm going to attack this, and then I'm going to jump into my own graduate picks. But the difference between Kinetic and a spring drive is, well, first of all, spring drive doesn't even have to be an automatic movement, whereas Seiko Kinetic was invented during the mid-'80s and launched under, I believe, the name AGS initially around 1986. It's literally what it sounds like. The kinetic energy on your wrist moves a rotor, just like with an automatic spring-driven mechanical caliber, but instead of turning a mainspring barrel that powers the watch, it operates a little dynamo that generates electricity that's stored in a battery or capacitor, depending on model, that then powers a pure quartz movement. Whereas the spring drive is a system wherein the energy is actually stored in a mainspring barrel, like a normal mechanical wristwatch, and what happens is that spring energy turns a regulating wheel. It's not a balance that bounces back and forth, it turns in only one direction. It creates a induced current by virtue of fixed magnets that powers a quartz oscillator, and the quartz oscillator produces a feedback that accelerates or slows that regulating wheel so that it turns the watch perfectly at the timing rate that is most in sync with the quartz. Thus, you don't actually see any steps to the hand of a spring drive system, whereas Kinetic still features a 1 hertz quartz jump every second. The spring drive is completely smooth since the turning of the regulating wheel governs how quickly that seconds hand and thus the minute hand and the hour hand can traverse the dial. It's pretty darn close to being as accurate as a quartz with a lot of the mechanical soul, watchmaker regulation, jeweling, oiling, plates, bridges, and structure that you see in a mechanical watch. And it took all of about 20 years to make it work. So spring drive is much more upscale. You'll see it on the Crador line, for instance, where some models cost in excess of $300,000. So it's a high horology movement type. So that's the difference between Kinetic and spring drive.
Couldn't have said it better myself.
Oh, right. So from there, we jump back to the Germain, and I have my picks for graduates. So I feel like being a JLC guy and a JLC junkie, I would be remiss not to recommend one. But because I've always felt that, honestly, the Reverso, and Niko, forgive me here, I'm a Reverso collector,
No,
you're a
sure.
Reverso enthusiast, but I felt that the Reverso is an acquired taste, and by default, non-round watches tend to give off an old man type of vibe. I'm cool with that because I love the Reverso and its history, and I know what it's about, and I know where it came from. But I do feel like someone has to come to the Reverso on their own terms and learn to love it rather than have it forced upon them. So for my graduate JLC, I suggest a Master Control, either the original Master Grand Tie in 37mm or the current 39mm watch, which you can get between $4,000 and $4,500. It's a handsome watch, it's a durable watch, it is a reliable watch, and it's the kind of timepiece that people immediately connect with. 3 hands and a date, it's very handsome, but like Niko's pick of the Elite Ultra Thin, it's low profile in as much as it doesn't declare your wealth or your lack of any need for a job when you step into an interview environment. It's low in profile, handsome, it'll last a lifetime, but it's not going to be a tell. If you're the poker player making your play for that first job, the watch isn't going to betray you. Now, I'm also going to pick something that, frankly, is a variation on the watch that I received for graduation. Niko, this is a little bit more in our wheelhouse as watch you want, but okay, I'm going to risk the Omega name and the Omega stigma when walking into an interview because I love the Omega Seamaster 300 Master Coaxial. This is a watch that is handsome, durable, rugged, can go in the water, no need to warn of anything in particular other than don't smash and bash it when you hand this over to your proud graduate. On a bracelet, you can get this watch at very reasonable prices. You should be able to pick one up under $5,000 now that it's been on the market for a few years. And believe me, purchase pre-owned because your graduate is not going to be any the wiser if you get it from a reputable dealer. Horologically interesting, coaxial caliber, tough as nails, has a little bit of a historical flair to it because it is based on the 50s and 60s Omega Seamaster Pros. So I would say this because I got the original Bond Seamaster when I graduated high school, and I wore that throughout well, not my high school years, but my summer after high school, my job in the deli, my 4 years of college. Once I got past basic training, I wore it through my naval aviation swim. That was a great companion of mine, and I treasured it for every single year it was on my wrist, and I still wear it around the office for kicks. So, Niko, I think we both agree Omega is a great way to go. You go Speedmaster, I go Seamaster.
Oh, we pretty much encaptured everything about it, and I think even Josh was commenting saying Omega's a great first watch. So, regardless of either way that you go, whether it's Seamaster or Speedmaster, they're both iconic for different reasons. They both have great educational backgrounds that you can go into, whether it be for their histories or what they represent or how they were put together. So I think on the whole, both choices are ideal.
Yeah, so these are great watches. And remember, when you're buying a watch for a graduate, buy something that's going to get them hooked on horology, isn't so high profile that they won't be able to get a job if they wear it to an interview, and isn't so delicate that they can't wear it like a normal watch with appropriate measures. And I should also mention that since we've spoken about entering the world of high horology, I want to speak of which you should not enter. Now, down this path, the modern watch auction lies some madness. And now, Niko, you had a good experience with a watch auction, but it was a relatively lower level event. Could you tell us a little bit about that?
Yeah, there was a watch auction going on locally, and I ended up picking up a couple of pieces. One of them, which was a Porsche design, which again, lower. Some would even maybe call that a micro brand. And did a quick flip and turned out fine. But what we're going to dive into is something that's a little bit on the upper scale, and seeing what kind of pitfalls you can get into with these auctions.
This is a fact, because I feel like these watch auctions have become a sort of blind money worship that frankly has depreciated the entire concept of watch enthusiasm and turned the watches into something other than the objects of sincere affection. Now, there's always something to be said for investing in a reliable asset class, but I'm going to come right out and say I don't think that's what the modern auction scene is creating. I think it's creating a bubble. So let me introduce, in my auction commentary, a blast from the past. Now, of course, Raf has both my macro camera showing my Patek Philippe 5016R and the November 10th, 2013 Antiquorum Geneva auction catalog cover featuring a watch with a serial number that's only 2 units off this one. And I believe that these high-level international auctions, over-promoted, overpriced, overhyped by the online news and watch community, have become something approaching an obscene spectacle in the watch community. My opinion is that with upcoming auctions from Philips in Geneva on May 14th, Christie's in Geneva on May 15th, and again, New York from Antiquorum in June, we really need to get our guards up and start being alert to the fact that these auctions are driving prices beyond sustainable levels. Not only are they creating that obscene spectacle, Niko, but they're becoming like stocks, real estate, and cars right now. Too much money, free floating money, is chasing increasingly unsustainable outlets and gains. Here's the problem. I'd prefer not to see the watch hobby sink to the same level of emotional decoupling of collectors and collectibles that witnessed the car community devolve into an endless procession of soulless, televised, and hyped auto auctions. This is where the collector who kept those muscle cars alive for 30 years after the muscle car era got priced out of the market, and these cars essentially became undrivable. They are objets d'art in their way, but they should be enjoyed by the people who love them most, not by the people who are going to keep them triple sealed in a bank vault in the case of watches, or parked in a climate-controlled cocoon in the case of the cars. And here's where the cautionary tale comes into play. Today, I feel like Patek and Rolex, and I think you'll agree with me, Niko, in terms of retained value, they are the blue chips. Like, they will be collectible in any era.
Yeah, definitely. I could see that. I mean, we've seen from some of the auctions that we've talked about, not even in those brands that have gone for such exponential amounts of money, that it's coming down to exactly what you said. And, I don't want to see it keep going that way either.
And here's the thing. I feel like there will be a correction even for those watches, but if you're buying a Patek Philippe 5016, guys, you know what you're buying, and you're going to have a watch that if it does take a haircut when the market crashes, it's going to regain it someday. My concern is for the second and third tier collectibles. Now, when I say that Patek and Rolex are like the Enzo-era Ferraris and the pre-war Bugattis of the car market, stuff like Universal Genève, Heuer, Longines, possibly even vintage Tudor is going to see a serious correction when the bubble for these watches bursts. Especially since we see prices for stuff continuing to rise simply because it's old and it's hyped online. Now, Ferrari and Bugatti, Niko, in the late 80s, I'm too young to remember it. I think some of us were too young to even be born at the time. But the bottom line is that the Ferrari and the Bugatti guys, in the end, they did all right. No, the $15 million GTO wasn't worth that in 1993, but it did eventually recover and surpass that number. But second-tier stuff like modern supercars being bid up to $1 million right out of the factory, and lower-level brands like MG, Triumph, Jaguar, a lot of 50s American cruisers, they took 2 to 3 decades to recover to the prices they were seeing in the late 80s in real money terms. And that's what I worry about with today's watch market. In December of last year, Christie's New York auctioned off an early Heuer Autavia 2446 for $125,000. Niko, 3 years ago, this was the kind of watch that would show up at like people's garage sales, and even between collectors who knew what they were dealing with, would sell for a few hundred, maybe a few $1,000s.
I can't even fathom that went for that. It's just unbelievable.
And the condition was good but not great, and the reference is fun, but not like historically earth-shattering. This isn't like, Winston Churchill's personal Datejust. This isn't like Douglas MacArthur's personal Reverso. This is just an old Heuer. And I feel the combination of hype and the breathless news cycle of the internet is the reason why within a month you saw that $125,000 auction sale, and then a seller in Germany offering the exact same reference for $200,000. Now, never mind the first runaway bidding stupidity that allowed the initial watch to pass the block at 125 grand. And remember, buyer's premiums have to be factored in there too. But instant 60% jumps in value are not natural or sustainable. For the same watch, blogs peddling irresponsible language, and I'm taking direct quotes here from blogs covering that first Heuer sale, breathtaking, describing the watch, and the ultimate Heuer grail. Look, I don't care what the ultimate Heuer grail is. I don't care if you find the actual chalice. The bottom line is that's ridiculous money. Add no critical perspective and value. That's the problem with language like that. It does nothing to guide the collector as to the real value of these watches, which after the fall is not going to be anywhere near the price of a Midwestern U.S. house. So here's what I think. Niko, we discussed a little bit before the show the Richard Mille RM59 Johann Blake, which is also an auction darling. What's your personal view of this thing?
I wouldn't pay $478, let alone $478,000. It's unbelievable. I don't know where that number came from, how it got there, and who in their right mind would wear it.
Yeah, during the late 80s, there was this phenomenon of new supercars coming straight out of the factory being sold for $1 million off of initial retail prices of like $150,000. That was not sustainable, and it was just a series of speculators buying from each other. There was never an end buyer. So these cars kept getting priced up and up and up, but there was never a landing pad for that new Ferrari F40, which was a brand new car right out of the factory. Those things hit $1 million, and then they crashed to about a tenth of that. And even those took a while to recover, and those were the last Enzo-era Ferraris. So when I see hysterical bidding for faddish independent brands and weird of this era design like that Richard Mille RM5901 Johann Blake, when it sells for almost $500,000 in 2015 at Sotheby's, New York, this is something that may not even look cool to a collector 10 years down the line, never mind 20 or 30. And when the crash comes, I think that these recently built late model watches that have no history behind them, no pedigree, and no source of real value other than whatever the last speculator asked, they're going to take the biggest haircut of all. And I really feel like 20 years down the line, let's face it, Niko, outside of like Olympic season, when do we ever talk about track and field?
Yeah, exactly. And that was the one thing that you kind of prefaced this question to me with is like, do you care about the name on this watch? No. Do you care about track and field? No. I mean, realistically, what is the drive behind that price? Purely an auction.
No, it's guy buying it to sell it to the next
Exactly.
guy. And blogs and news cycle like contributors basically hyping the whole thing, bidding and just egging them on, bidding them to go further. So, will this watch still look cool? The Johann Blake and a million others like it. We're seeing late model Pateks right out of the factory. We're seeing late model MB&F, Richard Mille. We're seeing these watches that might not even look cool 10 years down the line, with special editions like the Johann Blake dedicated to people that no one might even remember 10, 15 years down the line, in color combinations and materials that make them weird, not necessarily cool. When I look at this thing, and Raf has a picture of it, sports is not what comes to mind when I see this electric green, weirdly shaped tonneau Johann Blake watch. That's all I have to say about that. There's one customer for neon green watches, guys. He's sitting right here, and he's not into Richard Mille. So that's all I'm going to say. Watch what you buy, caveat emptor, and bidder beware.
Yeah, and make sure that when you go into an auction, you read the fine print. Make sure you understand how much your auction premiums are. Make sure you understand, how you have to submit payment. That's another thing. I was part of an auction once where I didn't realize that I couldn't, at the end of this internet auction, just pay with my PayPal or my credit card. I had to send, a check via mail to a certain address, and I wasn't a fan of that, so I didn't follow through. So make sure that you're aware of everything you're getting into when you take part.
Yeah. So on either the low end or the high end,
right, of course,
beware with auctions. And I'm just going to say that if you're the kind of guy who's got money to buy an investment grade watch, buy it privately from a collector who's going to give you all the paperwork, the entire backstory, some pedigree and provenance with the watch. Once you get into the world of the auction, now rationality kind of falls by the wayside. Whatever you do, don't take the blogs at face value. Don't buy into the hype. Don't get into a bidding war with anyone over anything. Unless you're the Patek Philippe Heritage Gallery with a limitless budget and a mandate to get a certain model, at some point, rationality, even on the blue chips, has to obtain. Everything's going to take a haircut, guys, whether it's Chinese real estate, U.S. stocks, muscle cars, Enzo-era Ferraris, or yes, contemporary watches, even Rolex and Patek. We are going to see a correction. Buy what you love because you can afford it and you can afford to hold it. And buy it with the assumption that it's a hobby, you purchase it for pleasure, and you'll lose money. Consider that the expense for having had a good time. And if it gains value, so much the better. But don't make that the purpose. So let's take a look at some of the questions, guys. Okay. So questions coming in. This is... Hey Tim, Niko, what's your view on vintage Zenith? Is there any value there, particularly the caliber 135s? Niko, could you speak broadly on what like a sub 36 millimeter men's watch from the mid-century does in terms of pre-owned sales? Because they haven't caught on vintage yet. The 135s haven't.
Yeah, no, they haven't. You're right. And as far as pre-owned goes, and anything sub 36, 36 is really the bottom line right now for men. Frankly, women are starting to wear 36s, and even bigger than that. So personally, I'll own a 36. I've seen a couple 36s I love, but it really depends on the model and the brand as well. Zenith on the whole, severely discounted. You guys can go on our site and see that, how much we're offering off on Zenith.
And that hurts the older watches too.
And of course, yeah, it takes a hit on the older ones. So, is it something that you can probably get into really economically? Yeah, it is. And it's still something that may have some value to a collector that is looking for that specific watch. Do I think it's caught on enough yet to say that it's an investment potential or something that is a value? No, not quite yet.
Yeah, that's the ultimate definition of like an undiscovered and unloved watch nerd vintage timepiece.
Absolutely.
I've always said that vintage Breitling is a great value for collectors because it hasn't been hyped or priced to death. Vintage Zenith is even better. There are some references that are starting to pick up, like the Chronometro CP2 Corellis, also early, like A386, A384, A385 style El Primeros, but they're nowhere near the insanity that's taken over Universal Genève, Heuer, Tudor, Rolex. That stuff's going crazy. Zenith and Breitling vintage still represent excellent values. Get a 135, take it to a wonderful watchmaker who knows his stuff, and it'll keep shockingly good time. That was built as a chronometer movement. Question coming in from Firehawk saying, any experience knowledge on Dornbluth and Son? There's another nice German watchmaker from Eastern Germany. These are great guys. Basically, the Dornbluth father and son combination, Dieter and Derek, great guys building fantastic stuff. wonderfully finished. I think that it's a great brand if you want to stray off the beaten path, even of conventional independent brand horology. They're even a little bit farther off the mainstream. I would put them in terms of profile along the lines of, I would say, the Gronfeld brothers. They're folks who are well regarded, know their stuff, do a great job, have all of the skills necessary to build a watch in-house. But again, you're outside the realm of, almost the mainstream of independent horology, and I'm going to define the mainstream as like Kari Voutilainen, MB&F, Richard Mille, Philippe Dufour, Urwerk, brands like that are well established on the independent side. With Dornbluth, you're definitely taking a step into the world of the owner proprietor, the watchmaker owner, and you're going to have a great, I think, opportunity to get a bespoke piece because of that relationship, but you're also going to have trouble if you ever do want to sell that watch because they are such a micro brand. Not in the sense that Fed uses the term micro brand, though.
I saw a question come in from, and I'm interested to get your take on this, of Raymond Foster says, do you think Breitling is a bad investment with the change of ownership?
Well, I'm going to say, first things first, Breitling is not a good investment because there are too many of them on the market, and they're poorly suited to the changing tastes of our time. Their watches are all huge. That's not really what the market wants, and they built too many watches for too many years. So there's going to be a flood of Breitlings floating around for years to come. That backlog is going to take a long time to clear. Watches aren't cars. Watches aren't like fashion and leather goods. They don't wear out. They don't age out of the market. So, Niko, what are you seeing in terms of Breitling resale from an investment perspective?
Okay, investment is not a word I would use in the same sentence as Breitling unless I was calling it a bad one. So, it's just one of those things that if you're buying pre-owned, if you're buying a pre-owned Breitling, it is a great time to buy.
Yes.
And they are still great watches. I'm not taking away anything from Breitling from a horological standpoint. I'm really not. But what Tim says is correct. The market is flooded. There is something to where if you walk into a boutique and pay 20 off, or even 25, some of the boutiques will give that off. I'm not sure they will, but if they did, you're still paying a little bit too much. It's something that we're buying these watches at such a low rate and selling them at a low rate that it's still something that I wouldn't invest too much into.
Here's the thing. Physically, they're great watches. I don't want to knock the quality of the watches. I think for the money, if you're buying one pre-owned, you're going to get one of the best chunks of steel you can purchase. Here's the problem with Breitling watches right now if you're going to buy them new. On the plus side, they're built like tanks. They really are that tough. In a water testing machine, they're incompressible. They're that solid. So they're built like tanks. The problem is they're also the size of tanks. That's not for everyone, and that's an increasingly of the 2000s, of the 2010s kind of thing that will look back as a feature of these watches that dates them 5, 10, 15 years from now. So they're built like tanks. They're the size of tanks. And if you buy them at anything close to retail price, the value tanks. So you have the 3 degrees of Breitling. And that's how I feel about them.
That answer is going to be its own 1.5-minute video because that was fantastic.
Yes, I just compared Breitling to a panzer in 3 different senses of the word.
Oh, wow.
Homonyms. Okay, so question coming in. This is from Tyler. Tyler is asking, okay, I'm having a tough time trying to decide between a Rolex Datejust 116234. So this is going to be a combination stainless steel and white gold with the blue dial and the new JLC Master Control sector dial time-only version. Well, here's the thing. The JLC is obvious. If you're buying these watches new, and the JLC is so new, I don't think you're going to find any pre-owned just yet. Obviously, at $5,700, it's hard to beat the value proposition of the JLC. Well, this is a watch that is principally constructed with industrial processes and machine finishing. It still does involve more hand finishing, adjustment, regulation, and assembly than the Rolex. The JLC still qualifies as a partly handmade watch, whereas the Rolex is very much an industrial product. With the Rolex, you're not going to get to see the movement. The JLC movement is not Patek Vacheron type stuff because of the price point, but it is very well built from a functional standpoint and very accurate. These two watches will have performance on par in terms of timing. But, and Niko, this is important. With the Rolex, on a bracelet, you can take that watch in the water. With the JLC, you're going to need a sports watch alongside it.
Yeah, I definitely could see that. I mean, if this was a one watch collection question, I would probably be going Rolex. I don't think it is that question. I think it's just a next move kind of question. So I would probably go with the Jaeger. And the reason being is, like you said, for the value, it really delivers. I love the look of that watch.
Yes.
I think overall, me and you would be big fans of that watch. And for me, I love a blue dial. The Rolex is really nice. However, if you had to put both of those in front of me and ask me to wear one for the day, I would go with the JLC. So, but both amazing choices. And if it is a one watch collection kind of thing, Rolex is my answer.
If you need a sports watch, the Datejust. If you want an exquisite watch, I would say you can't beat the JLC for the price.
Absolutely.
Okay, so questions coming in along the lines of vintage. This is from Hirobi. Vintage military watches. Do you think that the prices are still going to go up, or has a bubble formed? A bubble has definitely formed. There's no question a bubble is formed. Some watches probably still have some room to rise, but the question is, do you really want to catch a bubble on the updraft? I would wait for the correction, frankly. Stuff like Heuer Bundswehr, stuff like World War II era, post-war era, IWC, JLC, Omega, Mark 11 type watches. I think even stuff like the A. Corelli CP2 Chronometro in the Zenith catalog, I do feel like once the correction comes, there will be opportunities to pick those watches up, even though they're not quite at the lofty heights of certain Rolex and Omega 1960s military references. I think even those military references that still have some room to rise now will fall to lower than their current price points once the correction comes. What's going to cause the correction? I don't know. I can't foresee it, but I know a bubble when I see one, and all I can say is with bubbles, what comes up must blow down. And also, question from Firehawk, which is better. This is an interesting one. Okay, Firehawk. No, Fed. I think Fed has this one covered, so I'm going to jump straight to a question.
I saw one from Saki Kami, which I'm interested to hear your opinion on again.
Sure.
He says, why are there so many people that want to see the movement on a lower-end watch? I'm assuming he probably means 2,000 and under, possibly even micro brands under 1,000. For many modern watches, I'd much rather prefer a solid case back, especially those gold ones. So basically, he's asking why so many see-through case backs.
Yeah, it's interesting. Here's the thing, guys. I think that the see-through case back is there to amuse people on really entry-level watches who don't know what they're looking at, who don't have a level of connoisseurship to say that this is an entirely machine-built thing. It has no more soul than a quartz caliber, and we're going to put that on there because people see it on higher-end watches and they think it makes the watch, and they don't know what they're looking at, so they can't tell what a machine-finished bridge or a completely unfinished screw looks like. And honestly, I feel it's almost like an insult on... I mean, if you want to see what a mechanical movement looks like, it gives you that, but I really do feel like it's taking advantage of people who haven't had a chance to look at many watches and realize that an unfinished 25 Swiss franc base caliber is not an event worthy of a display case back. I'll also say this. I think it's a way of giving you less gold on an entry-level gold watch. Look, this Patek Philippe 5016, and I'll show you the case back, which is a beautiful display. There's nothing more worthy of a display case back than this. This is the apex of Olympus. This watch comes with an accessory solid gold case back, just to prove to you that the manufacturer is not cheating you of a full gold case. And honestly, on a watch with a movement unworthy of a display case back, and JLC thoughtfully included solid gold medallions on the old master controls with solid case backs. On a movement that's not worth a display case back, I would rather see solid, especially if it's a gold case.
I couldn't agree more. I think I see a lot of brands doing it, and I'm not going to name names because if you say one, you don't say another one, somebody gets upset. But there are a lot of brands that are, not even precious metals, that are, sub $2,000 range, putting these see-through case backs, and you're looking at it going, why am I looking at this? I don't need to see this at all. I totally agree with that. For a long time before I got into, upper level watches, I was thinking that, JLC really was the only one that had a reason to put a see-through case back on there, being that you could display it if you want to. To me, you actually have to take your watch off and look at it if you really want to see it, which I've always said, you know what, it's great, but it's not necessary.
I've even heard some connoisseurs say that they never want a display case back on an automatic watch. Now, I can see in the case of a micro rotor how you would want the display case back, but I can also see how with half of the movement perpetually blocked by a rotor, it really is just superfluous clutter. You don't necessarily want to see that. Because the other thing is when you have an automatic watch, you also have a rotor bridge. You have a winding system bridge. So you have the rotor and you have the bridge for the winding system all blocking your view of the base caliber. So I definitely understand the perspective there. I would say realistically, if the movement isn't worthy of being seen, if there isn't some sort of added value, something that's been done to the movement to make it interesting, even if it's machine finish. The Omega 8500s and 9300s are entirely machine finished, but with the arabesque coat, with the blackened screws, they're interesting to look at and worthwhile. The display case back is warranted. If you're just throwing in a 2824 straight off the assembly line and some robo hand is putting it in a case, honestly, I think I could do without that. So that's my view on display case backs.
Yeah, absolutely agree.
Okay, so guys, thank you so much for joining us tonight. I really appreciate Niko being here on the show.
Always love it.
Niko, how do our friends reach out to you if they want to?
Yeah, there's always a graphic when I start talking with my phone number. You can guys call, text anytime. I had somebody stop me outside the office. They saw me at a gas station and mentioned the show. That was surprising. So, but really cool. So, I'm glad we're reaching out and getting more views, every week. So we're glad. Keep subscribing. The watch review channel is coming up too. So,
yeah.
Let's keep going, guys.
Yeah, check us out on Instagram. Fed is always managing our Instagram account and responding to comments. I have the Watch Want Watch Reviews channel where tonight we are posting my review of the Patek Philippe 5016R Grand Complication.
First thing I'm watching when I get home.
And how do you get recognized at a gas station? I only get recognized at Basel World and boutiques.
Yeah, it was total luck, and it'll never happen again. But I had to tell everybody about it.
I want to thank Federico for manning the live chat. I want to thank Raph for handling my graphics suite tonight. Niko for joining us. So he's Federico, he's Raph, he's Niko. I'm Tim. This is Watch You Want, and thanks for logging on.